Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today on the Dairy Signal, we are going to go on a very timely topic here this afternoon. As for many of us, it is going to be starting a heat wave here, at least in the Midwest. But it is one of those time of year where, regardless, talking about heat stress is incredibly important for our animals. And we're going to be joined here this afternoon by Dr. Jimena Laporta, who is the assistant or the associate professor of lactation physiology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So we're excited to dive into this topic here this afternoon, especially as little did we know how timely it was going to be in this discussion. But lots to get into here this afternoon. So we're going to start things off right away with Dr. Laporta. How are you? What is going on in the world of dairy and research at Madison? And what are you excited to share with us here this afternoon?
Thank you so much for that introduction and for having me today. It's always great to have this opportunity to share our latest research with you. So thank you for the invitation. What's exciting for me is summer. It's our most busy time of the year, as you can imagine. That's when we do most of our research projects. So I'm excited about that. And kids at home, my hands are full with that. So it's a busy time of the year, getting ready to go to ADSA, to the American Dairy Science Association meeting next week. So lots of things happening.
Very busy, it sounds like.
Very busy. Yeah.
Well, and Dr. Laporter, I'm excited to get started here in just a moment, but I do want to remind those who are listening live that they have questions they can ask via Slido because I know, especially with this being a topic that's going to be on the mind of many, if not here in the next day or so, I want to make sure people can have the chance to ask their questions if they want to do so, and that's via Slido to the right of their screen. If they're on a desktop device and if they're on a mobile device, they can scroll on down below and type their questions in as we go here throughout this afternoon. But I know we have a lot of really good information to get to, so Dr. Laporta, I'm going to hand it back to you to get started.
All right. Well, thank you again. Today we're going to be talking about calves, the early life of calves, and emphasizing on the perinatal programming concept. We will briefly discuss perinatal in utero heat stress and maternal cooling interventions that we can apply to overcome those effects of prenatal heat stress. But the bulk of my talk is going to focus on mostly on the postnatal side of things, specifically the impact of heat stress on pre-weaned calves. And I'm going to be sharing some best management practices that we can apply in our farms to overcome heat stress in pre-weaning calves, and also share some of the more recent and in my opinion, cool approaches that we're doing in my lab as of recent years. So we're going to go right ahead with maybe. There we go. I want to just start with some considerations as we, like you said, we start preparing for summer heat, which is coming here very quickly. This week is going to be very hot and humid. So one of the things I wanted to bring up is that we cows start to feel the heat way before we do, and that's something that we have to remember. When we start feeling the heat, they are already heat stressed, okay? They have a different thermostat than we do, so we have to keep that in mind. Another important point that I want to make across today is that age matters. Mature cows are going to be thermoregulating differently than younger calves. The physiological state of that animal also matters, whether they are growing, gestating, lactating, and so on. And another thing that it's important to keep in mind in the context of heat stress is that we often think about two levels of environmental exposure. When we talk about macroenvironment, we talk about the season, the humidity level, the local climate. But when we talk about microenvironment, we're referring to the immediate environment that the animal is exposed to. And that's going to depend very highly on the housing, right? The housing design, ventilation, bedding, whether there's shade or not. So different things. And we were talking before we started today how important that is. So I guess no matter if you're a producer, a veterinarian, a consultant, a researcher, or my student that is watching, I think we all have a common goal. And that is to identify heat stress early and precisely, and to prevent the heat overload during summer across the country, obviously. And the goal is to improve cattle comfort, support health, and ensure long-term productivity of our cows. So I'm going to get right into the age consideration that I mentioned in our first slide. The mature cows and young calves are going to use the same four main routes of heat dissipation, but they are going to be experiencing the perception and the way that they are going to dissipate the heat is going to be a little different, where mature cows are going to have more tools in their toolbox to dissipate to cope with heat stress. Calves are going to have less tools in their toolbox, and they're going to be somewhat vulnerable to heat stress. Despite that they are smaller in body size and they have a larger surface area to mass ratio for heat exchange, they are going to have immature thermoregulatory systems, which are going to limit their ability to dissipate that heat effectively. For example, they're going to have thinner skin, finer hair coats. They're going to have less active sweat glands. They're going to have limited behavioral resources to dissipate heat. They're going to looking for shade and water consumption. They're going to be more lethargic and kind of getting used to that new environment. So they're going to somehow be a little bit more vulnerable to heat stress. Now, I want to make this point here that we talk a lot about the transition from pregnancy to lactation in cows, but calves also transition. And I think it's important to think about this transition from the fetal life to the life outside the womb. And they are going to be experiencing several stressors and physiological changes, metabolic changes, environmental changes, as you can imagine. And all of this is happening while they're systems and their organs are maturing and developing. So I think one of the stressors that, as you are well aware of, I'm more interested in is heat stress, right? So calves are going to be exposed to heat stress specifically at two key stages. One of them is prenatally or in utero during that fetal life. And this is especially important because this is when calves are growing exponentially and they are generating quite a lot of heat. And they are not really good as effectively dissipating when they are inside the placenta, the womb. So they have to rely on maternal regulation to regulate their temperature. So another time where they can be exposed is postnatally, as I mentioned, during that pre-weaning phase, those first 2 months of life. And this is important because calves during this time, they are adjusting their thermoregulatory mechanism. They are developing those. And this is an important time, as you all know, for the development of the immune system and also development of gut health and rumen function. And these two time points are important because there's growing evidence, not only in cows, but there's many evidence in other species that this perinatal programming effect of early life, it's important. And what it means is this idea that the environment that they are exposed to during this critical, what we call critical windows of development in the fetal phase and the neonatal phase, can really shape their animal long-term performance, their physiology, their health, and their productivity. So this is an important point I want to bring across during today's presentation. And we're going to be talking about this prenatal exposure to heat stress, what are the effects and how we can prevent those by maternal cooling, and also postnatal effects of heat stress and how we can prevent those. We're going to start with that. So all of the majority of the studies that I'm going to be showing have been conducted in collaboration with Dr. Jeff Dahl of the University of Florida. Clearly hot, humid environment, weather in summer. And in these studies, the THI remain above 75 for most of the day and the night as well. So briefly, we have a group of cows, multiparous cows that are dry and pregnant the last 6 to 8 weeks of gestation, and they have no access to cooling aside from the shade provided by the freestall barn, as you can see in this picture. So they are pregnant and they're going to generate heifers or F1s that are going to be experiencing in utero heat stress or IUHS for sure during late gestation. So we're going to follow them throughout their lifetime. And a few well-known hallmarks of in utero heat stress are going to be the impaired immune function, altered growth trajectories, and reduced future milk production. Now, concurrently, we have another group of cows, of pregnant dry cows, that are going to be in another barn and have access to cooling to mitigate the effect of heat stress. So briefly, these cows are going to be under the same THI, same summers, but they are going to be provided with fans 24/7 and soakers, water soakers, to promote evaporative cooling. Our goal there is to see if we can reverse or overcome the effects of in utero heat stress in those heifers. So what we see is when we provide this heat abatement to these cows, they are going to reduce respiration rate, rectal temperature, and that gestation is going to undergo more thermoneutral conditions. So we're going to generate this in utero cool, quote unquote, or calves or heifers that are going to be gestated under more thermoneutral conditions during those last 2 months of gestation. So one of the hallmarks of prenatal heat stress, as you all well know, is the negative effect on the developmental trajectory of the immune system, including both the adaptive and innate immune system. So luckily, what we show here is that providing prenatal heat abatement to these pregnant cows can rescue most of these effects. It reduces the immunoglobulin absorption by 10%. It increased, the apparent efficiency of absorption, as you can see in this graph here at the bottom. Let me see if you can see my cursor here. And this is going to translate into those heifers that are in utero cool to have excellent passive transfer compared to in utero heat stress ones that are going to only have fair passive transfer. And those are going to have lower immunoglobulin concentrations throughout the first weeks of life. And you can imagine how that can impact their immune system development. So providing prenatal heat abatement is overcoming most of these negative effects of in utero heat stress in the immune development. We see less health events. We see less treatments and medications in those heifers. We see higher circulating lymphocytes and also larger immune-related organs. So this is all indicating that they have enhanced immune development. So overall, we see that prenatal cooling, it's enhancing the robustness of the immune system of these calves and clearly setting them off to a better start. Now, another hallmark is the impact on the growth trajectory of these animals. In utero heat stress, calves are often born lighter. They're going to be shorter in height. They are going to have delayed developmental milestones. So implementing prenatal heat abatement can rescue all of these negative effects of heat stress, prenatal heat stress. It's going to extend gestation length to a more normal duration. It's going to result in heavier calves, taller calves. Those calves are going to have improved average daily gain, higher pre-weaning weights, as you can see in this graph. In the black bars, we have those in utero cool heifers that are taller throughout that pre-weaning period here, the first 60 days. But also we see that post-weaning, despite that after birth, all of these two groups are managed as a cohort, we see that even after weaning, those in utero cool heifers are taller, even up to 300 days of age, and they start to catch up with in utero heat heifers about 1 year of age. Now, the benefit of postnatal cooling are not only during the pre-weaning period, but they extend to their entire lifetime. So they have lifelong benefits on survival and productive life. So here, what we're seeing in the y-axis, this is the survival percentage from 100% when they are born to 0 when they leave the herd. And in the x-axis, we have all of these lifetime events, birth, weaning, first calving, first, second, third lactation. And in red, we have the in utero heat stress heifers. In black, we have the in utero cool heifers. And what we see is that the first observation is that if they are in utero cool, they are going to have increased survival to first calving. More of those are going to make it to calving. And those that start that the lactating strain, they are going to have increased productive life. So we're going to have on average 16% more in utero cool heifers making it through first, second, and third lactation. And overall, they're going to have an increased lifespan of about a year. So these are pretty significant effects. When we look at the milk production of those prenatally cool heifers and cows, we see here the first, second, and third lactation of those in utero cool animals, and we see pretty normal production for those three lactations. But it's more striking to see it when you compare it to the milk production of in utero heat stress heifers and then cows. As you can see here, there's in the first lactation, they're going to lose about 2 kilos per day in milk. And the second lactation, they're going to lose 2.3. And in the third lactation, 6.5 kilos per day. So we see these pretty significant reductions in milk production by in utero heat stress animals. And we can rescue that by providing heat abatement to these cows that are undergoing the dry period. We provide evaporative cooling devices so that they can gestate that heifer under thermoneutral conditions. So you can see that even a relatively short period of time during that dry period, late gestation, can lead to improvements that last for many, many years down the road. And I typically don't emphasize this enough. I just added this before this presentation, but we don't only see milk yield improvements by prenatal cooling, but we also see energy-corrected milk, fat, and protein percentage and yield improvements across all lactations. So it's more than just milk. It also can rescue milk components as well. So in general, prenatal cooling can help preserve productivity in these animals and extend the lifespan of these heifers, resulting in heifers that are more productive, cows that are more productive for an entire lifetime. So what is the mechanistic link between early life experiences or early life cooling in this case with long-term benefits that we see years down the road? I have been chasing this question for many years now. And what I think we believe that is happening is that providing this prenatal heat abatement and maintaining thermoneutrality during this late gestation period, it's important because it protects the developing heifer in utero from all these physiological and metabolic disruptions that we know that are caused by heat stress, and that is beneficial and is going to translate into these long-term gains in health, growth, and milk production later in life. Now, mechanistically, we have shown that in utero heat stress is going to trigger methylation changes in several organs and tissues, as I'm showing here. We have studied most of these. And cooling, what it's doing, it's shifting that epigenetic signature that it's wired by in utero heat stress. So what we're doing is wiping off those epigenetic signatures that lead to those detriments in health and production. And one organ that we have studied the most in this area is the mammary gland for its obvious function in making milk. And so what we have seen is that in utero heat stress derails not only the early life development of this gland, but also leads to reductions in cell proliferation and in the development of that lobuloalveolar growth in the mammary gland that it's necessary for those future cows to produce milk. So this is really a fascinating topic for me. I really look into the molecular cues on why is this happening and how we can potentially fix it. But I'm not going to expand on this and bore you with this today because I really want to spend some time talking about the other side of heat stress in terms of calf early life, and that is the postnatal period.
So, Dr. Laporta, before we head on to that postnatal period, we did have a question come in, if you would mind answering it here for a second. This one reads, when we're talking about in utero and those calves that are cooled versus non-cooled, the question reads, what are those critical windows of development? Is it mainly at dry off that heat stress will have the largest impact on the calf, or is it at any point in pregnancy?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. All of the phases of gestation are going to be important in different ways. The reason why we focus on the late gestation is because that's when the calf is growing very rapidly. Actually, 60 to 70% of the birth body weight is acquired during that time. That cow is dry, so we can apply some management strategies. So all the tissues and organs are there, are developed, but they are maturing. The calf is growing exponentially. So I think that's really a time where we can influence the growth trajectory of those calves, heifers. Earlier in gestation, clearly those points are important. If we go earlier in the preconceptional period, those first 60 days, you're going to have more of a binary outcome, whether they survive or not. You're going to have early pregnancy losses, perhaps. And in that mid-pregnancy, typically if cows are under heat stress, we're going to cool them. So the growth of that fetus is still not exponential. So there's less demands for that fetal growth. So I think, all phases are important, but I think the last 2 months of gestations are particularly critical for the growth of this heifer.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'll let you continue on here with the
All
postnatal
right.
prevention.
Yes, let me see. There we go. So there's generally this perception that calves are less vulnerable to heat stress. They are better able to cope. They are more thermotolerant because they are smaller. They produce less metabolic heat, and all of that. It's helping them, right, for heat dissipation. But as we alluded to earlier, they have fewer tools in their thermoregulatory toolbox, and this is because they are immature at this time. They're not working as well, and they are developing. Now, just like us and like humans and mature dairy cows, calves are going to be at homeotherm. So they're constantly working to maintain that core body temperature within this narrow physiological range, regardless of what's going on in the environment. So when these temperatures exceed this certain range, I don't want to say one specifically because that can vary greatly. And so when it's outside of this range, they are going to be diverting that energy for important functions such as growth and immune development to keep their core body temperature in check. So this is important to remember. Now, cats are going to feel the heat too. And these high summer temperatures and humidity are going to be triggering responses that are beyond the normal physiological range of a calf of this age under resting conditions. So this is a study that we did in Florida, subtropical summer, where we measure respiration rate and rectal temperature over a summer across the day. So at 7 a.m., 1 p.m., and 7 p.m. And we have here what would be considered physiologically normal for calves of that age. So we have 30 breaths per minute and 101.5. Sorry about that. So we have respiration rate and rectal temperature. And what we see is that respiration rate is going to increase by 25 breaths per minute above what's considered physiologically normal as that day progresses. And rectal temperature, too, is going to increase linearly as the heat accumulates throughout the day. So we can see that calves are going to feel the heat, too, as the day progresses and they accumulate heat. We have these two very recent retrospective analysis of records that were published in the Journal of Dairy Science Communication, and they highlight the importance of this early life thermal environment. I really recommend you to read those. The first one is from Florida, and they focus on Florida and California, and they show that if they're born in the cooler season, they are going to live longer. And the second study is in the Midwestern US by Dr. Brakely in Illinois, and they show that calves that are born in the cooler season, they're going to do better, especially during that pre-weaning phase of life. So very interesting study, kind of corroborating the importance of early life environment. And this has been really the motto of my lab. Early life environmental matters, and it does matter. So we have other problem is that typically calves are not offered heat abatement, or they're not in our minds when it comes to heat abatement on farm. So trying to find solutions for these, this is the part I want to emphasize today, comes with some challenges. Starting off with when should we cool them, or when should we intervene, and how should we intervene? Another one that comes to mind when we think about these challenges is that many of the impacts of early life management decisions that we made on farm are not immediately visible. We don't see the effects right away, so it's difficult to measure success in the long term. So we have to trust and we have to wait for sometimes for years after. But in practice, I think our goal is to find and to measure outcomes that can translate into measurable return on investments over the animal's lifetime. We have to think about the animal lifetime in this case. So if we can find that these management interventions will reduce mortality, disease, lower veterinary cost, or improve longevity and productivity, that will be a win-win, right? So I have this here. Any good news for the calves? I guess I think the good news is that this topic is it's being talked about, right? Even between farmers, and there's more attention being paid to recognizing these early life critical windows in a calf lifetime that can really shape their performance. And I'm going to show you some of the data we have to back this statement. Now, I want to start with when should we intervene? We really try to get stab at this first question. And when do calves begin to experience heat stress? So for this, we did two studies, one in Florida and one in Wisconsin. So kind of looking at the more subtropical climate and temperate climates. And our goal here was to find environmental and animal-based indicators of heat stress, finding those benchmarks at which the physiology of the animals start to change with the change in the environment. So briefly, what we did is we measure environmental indicators of heat stress, temperature, humidity, calculated THI. And in the animal, we measure different animal-based indicators of heat stress, skin temperature, different locations in the animal, rectal temperature, heart rate, respiration rate. And we did this across several months, about 6 months, to capture this wide range of responses and wide range of temperatures and THI across these two different climates. So I'm not going to show you all the data, but I want to show you respiration rate because I think it illustrates the point here. So in this graph, we have respiration rate across the temperature humidity index. The top, we have Florida in red, and in the bottom, we have Wisconsin in green. I apologize if you're colorblinded. I just realized I have red and green here. But the point here is that we found a breakpoint of 65 in terms of THI. And this is when those calves in Florida are going to begin to abruptly increase the respiration rate. And every unit increase, this is what the slope is telling, every unit increase in THI, respiration rate is going to increase by 2.5 breaths per minute from that point. And that point is 30 breaths per minute. In Wisconsin, we see the breakpoint at the THI breakpoint at 69. And every unit increase above that, the respiration rate in those calves is going to start to increase by 2 breaths per minute. And what we see in both cases is that the physiological breakpoints for respiration rates are 30 and 40 breaths per minute. So that's much lower than what we typically consider for cows, which we typically say 60 to 80 breaths per minute as a break point for when they start feeling the heat. Now, if we were to plot these, but now using temperature, dry bulb temperature in the x-axis, those environmental breakpoints would be 20 degrees Celsius or 68 Fahrenheit for Florida, and 21 degrees Celsius or 70 Fahrenheit for Wisconsin. And I don't know about you, but when the temperatures are around that, I'm very happy. And these are pretty comfortable temperatures for most human beings. But the calves are already starting to change their physiology to adapt to that environment. So they're increasing respiration rate, increasing rectal temperature, and starting to feel the heat. Now, when we plot those, this is the temperature humidity index in the y-axis across 24 hours of the day in Florida and Wisconsin. If we plot those dotted lines highlighting the breakpoints that we found of 65 and 69, I think it's pretty evident to see that in Florida, calves are going to be exposed to heat stress 24/7, both day and night, with THI that are going to be consistently above 69. And in Wisconsin, I've heard this a lot. We don't have heat stress here. Calves are not experiencing heat stress. But I want to challenge that and show you how in Wisconsin, still, calves can experience heat stress for even more than 13 hours a day. They are above that 65 THI threshold. So to me, that's a pretty significant thermal burden on those calves. So this data is showing THI breakpoint of 65 to 69 as this critical transition when these calves are going to be experiencing thermal heat load and begin to rise this rectal temperature and respiration rate abruptly. So to keep that number in mind as we move forward. So we have a problem, calves are heat stressed. The next problem is how to intervene, how we cool them. What are we currently doing to provide heat abatement to calves during summer? And this is what we were talking earlier today about housing. As you all know, calves can be housed in many different systems across the US. We do have some what I like to call best management practices that are widely adopted on farm, and these are strategies that are trying to help those calves to relieve that heat of summer and prevent overheating. If you're thinking about outdoor hutches, which are very popular here in the Midwest, there are easy things we can do to prevent that overheat of the hutch. If you have ever been inside a hutch, you know it gets very hot in there. So shade supplementation, we can use covers, natural trees, metal shade cloths, as you can see in these pictures. And that's going to help reduce the internal temperature of the hatch and reduce the calf rectal temperature and reduce those respiration rates significantly. We can also try to improve natural or passive ventilation. And we can do this in many different ways. The orientation of the hatch matters as much as giving shade, the material of the hatch as well. In summer, we want to face north. In winter, we'll west. Elevating the hatch, that's a very simple way to improve that natural ventilation going in that hatch and removing that still air. And also, as my colleague here in Wisconsin, Dr. Van Oss, have shown, even with simply adding extra rear vents and popping that rear door open can really help with moving that air and improving natural ventilation, and that the calves can really feel it. Now, if you're group housing calves, whether it's in pair or larger groups, these typically are inside barns with shade of the barn. And in these cases, the emphasis is mostly in trying to get that air exchange per hour in check for ventilation purposes and air quality purposes, and that's great. But there are really no current guidelines for what airspeed do we want for cooling purposes. And when I started doing this research, I was very surprised of the very limited studies that are using more mechanical cooling for pre-weaning calves for cooling purposes. So I thought that was an opportunity to provide some new ideas here. And this has been our approach to pre-wean calf cooling. We think a little bit outside the box sometimes, but nothing venture, nothing gain. So what our approach is to try and bring them back to thermal neutrality by providing mechanical cooling and evaporative cooling strategies to pre-wean calves in different climates and in different housing types. As we know, across the US, calves can experience different climates and very changing climates as well. And as we talked about earlier today, there are many different ways we can house calves. And so we try to provide a wide range of possibilities here. So I want to walk you through some of these, but first I want to show you how how we can promote convective and evaporative cooling in calves. And the concepts are similar to mature cows. So when it's hot, the blood flow is going to increase and go into the skin surface due to vasodilation in an attempt to dissipate that heat. So the skin temperature is going to rise. And if the air surrounding that animal is still, the heat is going to build up and that animal is going to get hot, it's going to get heat stress, and rectal temperature is going to start to increase. Now, when we provide fans, this fast moving air across the calf skin, this air is going to carry the excess heat from that body, from that skin surface, and it's going to be transferred to the air. And it's going to reduce calf respiration rate and body temperature. And if we combine that with misters or sprinklers, it's going to enhance the ability of those calves to evaporative cooling. So convective and evaporative cooling combined. So this is the same concept as in cows. Now, I'm going to walk you through some of the experiments that we have done. This is our first study we did in Florida. This was back in 2018. So we used mechanical ventilation to increase their speed at calf height in group housed calves that were in these open side barns with mobile curtains, and they were in automatic feeders. So we were providing these barrel fans. And what we found is that at the center of those pens, we have 4 heat stress pens and 4 pens that we have calves with fans. The airspeed was 2 meters per second on average in the center of that pen. And with that, we could improve thermal regulation. We could promote convective cooling. And those heifers, those calves here, we have bulls and heifers, all of them were able to reduce rectal temperature, reduce respiration rate, and reduce skin temperature compared to calves that had no fans. As you can see in this graph, this is the skin surface temperature across the hours of the day. And you can see that, of course, the pattern is similar, but in red, you can see the calves without fans. And in black, you see the calves with fans. So they have lower, on average, 1 to 2 degrees Celsius lower across the entire day. So this is very helpful to promote convective cooling. Very simple, 1 oscillating fan and 1 static fan providing air to those calves. We also see improvements in feeding behavior. Providing fans, these calves drink more milk. They drink throughout the day, even at the hottest time of the day. They drank the full allotment. We provided tops 10 liters, so we drink it all. We came back for more, and so they were still hungry, whereas the other ones limited their intake. The ones that were heat stressed limited the intake to the early morning and evening, and they didn't drink the full allotment, so they were doing it more sparse throughout the day. We also had cameras here in collaboration with Dr. Miller Cushion in Florida. So we see some very interesting postural behaviors. If they have access to fans, they spend more time lying, and they spend more time lying in the center of the pen where the air is maximal. And they spend more time in this sternal tuck position and less time lying laterally, as we can see here, this example of a heat stress calf that they trying to extend their extremities to presumably to exchange more heat with the sand. We also see that providing fans reduce the number of treatments in those calves and the number of medications that we had to give them. So all positive effects of providing fans in these calves. And despite we didn't see major differences in the growth trajectory and average daily gain during that pre-weaning phase where we did most of our measurements. When we went back, we had heifers and bulls here. When we look at where the heifers were producing 2 years later, we see that they were producing 2.4 kilos more per day on average if they had access to fans in early life. So this is kind of the first indication that we had, well, there's some carryover effects of just providing heat abatement during those 60 days pre-weaning. So this was very exciting for us. And when we finished that project, submitted a paper was accepted. And I accepted also an offer to come to Wisconsin And so we were all very excited about that. So we packed our stuff. Some of my students stayed because we were running another project. And I drove 17 hours from Florida to Wisconsin with now Dr. Data Sen. I was my grad student at the time. So we have a lot of time to chat and plan what was the next project that we were going to do for her dissertation. So we came up with this idea, obviously keeping in mind that in the Midwest, we see a lot of outdoor hutches, right? So we came up with this idea. We have individual sun-bedded poly hutches in our dairy here. So we provide solar powered energy to power the fans that were redirecting the air inside these hutches, as you can see here, by these tubes that are, they have a custom rear opening in the back. This video is showing the airspeed inside that hatch. So we did this in collaboration with Dr. Vanoff and Dr. Doria that were already here in Wisconsin. So super exciting to work with them. And this was funded by the Dairy Innovation Hub, just a plug here. So what we see is we provide, in this case, this was a first prototype, so a proof of concept. So we did a small Latin square, providing 4 days of cooling, 3 days old, 3-week-old heifers, and we provide daytime cooling here. Inside that hatch, the airspeed was 2 meters per second. And we were able to see improvements in thermoregulation, lower sweating and respiration rates in the morning. And what we did here is we did inside and outside restrictions of 30 minutes to actually look at what was the effect of if that heifer was using that hatch, was inside the hatch. So we see some promising things here. Of course, this is our first prototype, so it's not perfect. So we learned a lot of things along the way. One of those was that it was a little bit noisy. And because of that, we thought we had cameras here as well. So we see that calves, those heifers spend more time lying, but they do spend a little bit time more outside the hatch. So that's a good thing that they spend more time lying, but we wanted them to spend more time inside that hatch. So you live and you learn. So I fired Bethany. No, I'm just kidding. She had to graduate, but I got myself a new student, Grace. And what we did here is we refined this system. So we had daytime and night cooling time as well for this experiment. We bifurcated that too. We added a silencer, and we had this fan on continuously for 4 weeks, and then we turn it off until weaning. And what we see here is the airspeed now that we bifurcated that too, with 1 meters per second. So we reduced that, and we wanted to do that. We see that the THI inside the hatch is 1 unit lower in those hatches. So that was a good indication. And we see improvements in thermoregulation as well, with including that nighttime cooling. We see reductions in skin temperature and rectal temperature after we did now 1 hour inside restriction and 1 hour outside restriction. So we see improvements in thermoregulation. Excited about that. We also did lung ultrasounds and health outcomes. It's one of the perks of having Dr. Olivet as a neighbor here in the vet school. So we collaborated, and she went to the farm and did some of the ultrasounds herself and trained my students as well. I was a little bit worried that adding this nighttime cooling was going to increase the pneumonia cases, but we see that it did not increase pneumonia. All calves were healthy, so that was good to see. Perhaps a more interesting result here is to see that the improvements in hatch microclimate, we have lower level of ammonia inside the hatch. We have lower levels of formaldehyde inside the hatch with fans. We have fewer colony-forming units. We cultured the air inside those hatches, and we counted the bacteria that grew in those plates. So we see significantly less colony-forming units, an overall improvement of air quality in those hatches. And also another student of mine focused on looking at the immune cell-mediated immunity in those calves, and we see a lot of improvements in that sense. So very happy to see that. And I'm a firm believer that sometimes you have to try things yourself. As you see in this picture, I'm testing that the interior of that hatch. And especially if I were a calf, I would choose to be on a hatch that has that extra ventilation, especially after seeing this survival curve. As you can see here, there's a higher retention to first lactation of those heifers that had access to fans during these 4 weeks of life. So this is very exciting to see, although this figure is preliminary. We don't have a lot of numbers here, but it brings the point that it brings that idea that this thermal comfort earlier in life can really pay off later, and as the main goal of our research. Now, another idea that we had was, can we use positive pressure tube ventilation for calves? And in here, we provided continuous airflow during the day, during the night, with misters to calves that were housed outdoor in hutches. This is another student of mine, Maverick Gunther, and we did this in collaboration with Dr. Shattow at the University of Georgia. This is a commercial farm in Georgia. And we worked with Courtney Holbach at the Dairyland Initiative to put together this prototype to provide PPTVs for calves. And see the air is flowing there 24/7, and we have daytime misters as well in this prototype. This is, we have wire hatches and metal shade structure, 80% shade cloth, and this is us setting up the fans. And what we're doing here is we're providing horizontal calf level airspeed. If you look inside that tube, you can see they have 5 holes, 3.5 inches each, and they have one of those holes had a nozzle that was providing a fine mist during the day. So what we found here is that we have increased airspeed at different distances from the rear hatch compared to almost no airspeed in hatches that did not have access to this tube. So on average, we have 1.8 meters per second, which is about 6 miles per hour in those hatches with fans, with the PPTV system. So we wanted to see how effective was that at the different locations within that hatch. So we did this experiment across 2 days. We measured every 6 hours where we blocked the tube, as you can see here, where we push that heifer to be closer to the tube or farther away from the tube with this mesh. And what we see is all good news. We see improved heifer thermal indices, even when they are restricted close or farther from the tube and the water nozzle versus this blocking the air. So this was all great news. And one of the main important things that we find is that the microclimate of that hatch was improved. So we did that across 2 days. We measure the temperature and humidity, and we show that by providing this PPTV system, we improve hatch microclimate. We reduce nighttime temperature, as you can see in this graph. The red is the heat stress calves, and the black is the calves with access to the tube system. And you can see that during the night, they have those hatches have lower temperatures, on average 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So we are allowing this nighttime cooling that goes all the way until noon the next day. Clearly, when it gets this hot, there's nothing you can do apparently. But it gets very, very hot during those summer days in Georgia. But again, this is very interesting to see that, especially in this climate where it's hot and humid day and night, that we can provide nighttime cooling for those calves. We see improvements in thermoregulation, reduced skin temperature, respiration, rectal temperatures. And we see in collaboration with our colleague in Georgia, we put some cameras and we see that the heifers are choosing to spend time closer to that tube during the day, but also during the night. So that was great to see. Now, all of this is part of a bigger project that we have in collaboration with Dr. Shattow. We have different planes of nutrition. We're following hundreds of heifers to their first lactation. So there's a lot coming from these projects. And if you want to learn more, if you're heading to ADSA next week, we are going to have a few posters and presentations. So please come and check on those. Now, before I wrap up, I want to share our latest adventure, our current adventure, and this is testing a PPTV system now for indoor calves in Wisconsin. So we're very fortunate to work with progressive dairymen here in Wisconsin that they want to provide a better environment for the calves during summer. So we took this opportunity to do this project. So this here we have air blowing vertically from the tube to the hatch. It's a 20 inches in diameter tube. One tube is providing air for about 30 calves. Our latest data as of last week, inside those hatches, we have 1.5 to 2 meters per second. And in the hatches where they didn't have these tubes, the airspeed was zero point 0.3 meters per second. So pretty significant increase in the airspeed at the calf level. So this is a video showing another perspective of the tube, showing how one opening for one hatch, as you can see here. And let me play this video again. Here is Courtney Hallback smoking those tubes and trying to look at where the air is flowing. And you can see again that air is going downwards to that calf individually. And it's allowing with only one fan to bring air to that end of the barn. So it's homogeneously distributing that air. So this is ongoing. So stay tuned for updates. This is me taking some air quality samples and airspeed measurements here, my student Maverick. So we're going to be collecting sample across this summer. So next time you invite me, I can share some of this cool research with you. So we cover a lot of ground today. Let me see if I can go to my last slide here. We covered a lot of ground today on calf heat stress and how heat stress can impact calves even before they are born in that prenatal and indoor environment. That can have long-term effects in their multiple lactations. Also, we look at the other side of the equation with heat stress impacting that pre-wean heifer and starting to show that those beneficial effects later in life in survival and production. So I think I want to bring the point here that heat stress is more than just impacting lactating cows in summer. It really can impact calves, both in utero and during the post-weaning phase. And also some of the things that we didn't talk about today, but I have talked about in other occasions here, is the effect that it can have beyond the summer as well in multiple generations, because this in utero heat stress calf, heifer will give rise to another generation that it's also impacting, is also producing less milk. And also the cow herself, when she's heat stressed, you have heard me talking about this, Dr. Dahl talking about this, how her next lactation is going to be greatly impacted. So just bringing in the bigger picture here and wrapping up, wanted to thank all the students. They really are amazing, students in Florida, and those brave enough to move with me to Florida. I have a new cohort here. Collaborators, especially Dr. Dahl in Florida, starting all of these projects there. Funding, USDA has been really good with us. In Florida, Southeast Milk Checkoff and here the Dairy Innovation Hub, they really do help a lot in doing these projects and bringing in all the information to you. And Sila Bag with his latest project, they donated those funds, so thank you for that. All the grad students, postdocs, undergrads, visiting scholars, all the facilities that help us do this research. So with that, I want to thank you again, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, Dr. Laporta, I have to say you did a great job at not only expressing and showing us how heat stress has an impact not only on the life that they're living, but so much more to what is going on beyond that current time frame in their life. But we've got some questions to run through real quick. So I'm going to start from the top of the list and head on through. The first one reads, is it true that calves that experience heat stress are more likely to get sick aside from the other negative impacts like reduced growth rate?
Yes, yes. We have seen that over and over. They are born smaller. They have this decreased ability to absorb immunoglobulins no matter what colostrum you give them. It's something about their guts that is not letting them absorb that immunoglobulin, and that can, as I showed earlier, it can lead really to those calves being more sick more often and leave the herd sooner. So yes, the impact is pretty big. Yes.
Okay, the next question here reads, how much does hutch bedding type impact heat in the hut and the natural air ventilation?
That's a good question, and I haven't tried different beddings myself, but I think like sand is pretty good during heat stress, pretty preferable to um, others because it has the ability to cool some. You see in that project that I show you in Florida, we see these calves like extending their legs because the sand was presumably cooler. In this last project in Georgia, we did measure the temperature of the sand, and we could see that in the PPTV hatches, the sand was cooler. So indeed, you can really help that heat dissipation route from the contact with the animal with the sand to release that heat. So I would say sand, it's a pretty good option.
Okay, and I have to say, as somebody who lived in Georgia only for one summer, I cannot imagine how the calves do what they do and are able to,
Yeah,
continue on in their daily lives because holy man, does it get hot
it
there.
was it was hot. I mean, I lived 5 years in Florida, then came back to Wisconsin, and when I went down there 4 or 5 times for this project, I really felt it. And we had calves that have 106 temperatures. It's really insane what they go through. So whatever we can do to help them maintain thermal neutrality as much as possible, or even a little bit, it will help.
Yes, I love that anything can help. Next question here reads, has there been any studies on crossbred calves for beef and if heat stress impacts their lifelong rate of gain?
Yes, I am not aware of studies I have not done myself. We have done studies in beef, in Angus crossbred with Brahman in Florida, with Dr. Di Lorenzo offering shade. And we see benefits of that as well. It's just simply shade again on beef cows on pasture. But cross um, with dairy, I haven't seen actually any studies, but I want to say that they will be impacted as well. Yes.
It would make sense from the information you've provided. But next question then reads here, what is the ideal airspeed for calf pens or hutches?
That's a good question. And we had no idea when we started. So we started with that 2 meters per second or 4 or 5 miles per hour in mind, from cow studies. That was kind of our goal. In the hutch, 2 meters per second, in our opinion, was a little bit too much in their face, in that confined space. So we lowered that down to 1 meter per second when we bifurcated the tube. In the group housing, we have big, larger pens. We have 8 to 10 calves per pen. So those 2 meters per second, obviously the airspeed was a little different depending on where you measure it. But at the center of the pen, it was 2.1, 2.2. And that seems to be right on spot because we see all these benefits. But I haven't personally tried different airspeeds to see what's optimal or not. I think like we were talking about earlier, it will really depend on the type of housing you're using. Are they under shade? Do they have, are they in barns? Are they in closed hatches? Are they wire hatches? On that last experiment in Georgia, they had wire hatches. So you're maximizing natural air, natural ventilation. But in that graph that I show, you can see that is very low. It's zero point 0.3 meters per second. So that's probably not enough.
Well, I mean, it's definitely one of those cases where it sounds like there's a lot of trial and error that need to go into figuring out what
Absolutely.
works for
And I
you.
think that's our mindset, like you have to try, you have to keep trying. And what's optimal, I would say between 1 and 2 meters per second across the studies we have done, that seems to be helping.
Okay. Last question then for you here today. As we're thinking about everything that we've gone through, which is quite a lot, especially when we think from
Yeah.
in utero to pre-weaning to all of that research that you guys have done, which is quite extensive. When you're leaving producers here today and they're thinking about what they can do, what's that one or two key points you want to make sure they're thinking about or actively doing after today?
I think, like I said earlier, anything you can do to protect them from the heat will help. I think, starting with shade is always the number one recommendation. That's direct exposure to solar radiation. It's a killer. It really increased the heat load in those calves. So whether you're doing hatches outdoor, maybe providing supplemental shade to that hatch. The calves want to seek shade, but that hatch, if it gets too hot, then that's going to be detrimental. So providing extra shade on top of the hatch will help as well. Mechanical ventilation seems to be helping quite a bit, although I understand that's a step ahead maybe nowadays, but we show that it can really help as well. But I would say ventilation, plenty of water, monitoring those calves. We have provided some benchmarks. I think as soon as it hits 70 degrees Fahrenheit and THIs of 62, 63, 65, we know that they are going to start to feel the heat, even though we might not feel it yet. I think that taking those preventative measures are really important.
Well, I have to say, I think that's a great way to end today's episode, especially as we are going into a heat wave here. It's maybe thinking about a little bit more of today's tips and tricks on what can work on your farm. But with all that being said, Dr. Laporta, it's been a true pleasure to have you on here once again. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time here this afternoon.
Thank you so much. And I hope you had a great summer. And don't forget to cool your calves.
That is the best way to end it here today. So, with all of that being said, I'm just going to reiterate stay cool this upcoming weekend, and we'll see you here next week on the Dairy Signal. Bye now.
Thank you again. Bye.